Okay, so the truth is, and this is sad to say, but the black crime rate has been significantly higher than the white crime rate for literally 150 years. It's been very high for a very long time. The black murder rate was 10 times the white murder rate in 1900. So this has been true for a very, very long time.
Okay, you have got to be kidding me. This man just said that the black crime rate has been higher than the white crime rate for literally 150 years. So let's go back 150 years ago to 1868. The 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, was ratified in 1865. So let me ask you a question. 3 years after slavery ended, do you think cops treated black people the same way they treated white people? But jump forward 100 years to 1968 during the Civil Rights Movement, when you saw black people being beaten, sprayed with hoses, and attacked by dogs. Say something that's silly when there's all of this empirical data, all of this film, all of this footage of black people being attacked by police officers, teenage black kids being attacked by police officers for trying to walk into school. Now, shortly after, he mentions the year 1900, and I'm hoping he doesn't think 1900 was 150 years ago. I mean, judging from the first statement he made, he could possibly, but we're going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt and move on. But that's absolutely nonsensical. As a matter of fact, national crime reports were not collected by the FBI until the year 1930. The information available shows that there was zero difference when it comes to race. The reason that the Uniform Crime Report was started by the FBI in 1930 is to actually prevent newspapers from creating fake crime waves, which resulted in more violence and more oppression for minorities, including and especially blacks. Newspapers in the early 1900s would create these fake crime waves. There were all of these fake reports of crime, especially people accusing black people of doing things they did not do. I mean, if you even look at examples like Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Little Africa, or some people call it Black Wall Street, when you have a community of black people being murdered for a false crime report that never happened. There was a long history around fake crime reports, which is why the Uniform Crime Report came to exist in 1930. So the information that you just gave on stage was completely, terribly false.
The culture war continues to polarize. The big story over the weekend is that Nike, in a viral piece of marketing, decided that it was deeply necessary to reward Colin Kaepernick. So you remember Colin Kaepernick. He's that irrelevant backup quarterback from 2016 who made a name for himself by kneeling for the national anthem. And let us recall that Colin Kaepernick had already been made a backup quarterback to, I think it was Blaine Gabbert in San Francisco. In other words, he was a garbage quarterback. He was one of the lowest rated quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he was, at the time he was benched, the lowest rated quarterback in the NFL. Like, out of 32 starting quarterbacks, he was number 32. And Colin Kaepernick was benched.
Ben Shapiro is not smart enough to realize he just admitted Colin Kaepernick should still be in the NFL. Most NFL teams have an average of 3 quarterbacks on the depth charts and rosters in a season. At any time during the NFL regular season, there are about 96 different quarterbacks in the league. So if Colin Kaepernick is ranked as number 32, as Ben claims, then he is beyond a single doubt worthy of being an NFL quarterback, because when ranking all quarterbacks for performance, he is still good enough to outrank 2/3 of the entire group of quarterbacks in the entire league. Colin currently has a lawsuit against the NFL, which makes the claim that team owners have colluded to keep him out of the league. Ben is supporting his claim. I just wish that Ben was a lawyer for the NFL, because he would clearly help Colin Kaepernick easily win the case with statements like this. And if you look at the career stats of Colin Kaepernick, they clearly support the fact that he should still be playing in the NFL. So Ben Shapiro either doesn't watch football or loves to tell lies. Which one is it?
And then in the preseason of 2016, before Trump was president, he started to kneel for the national anthem. It is also to be remembered that Colin Kaepernick, who said he was kneeling for the national anthem to protest widespread police brutality or some such nonsense, he's the kind of person who is wearing on practice field socks with pictures of cops as pigs. There's legitimately pictures of pigs with cop hats on them, because this is what he thinks of police officers.
And that was an insult to the pigs. Pigs are very smart and relatively peaceful animals.
this guy who grew up actually pretty privileged. He was adopted, and he grew up in a pretty privileged area of California. It's all kind of ridiculous. It's all kind of ridiculous.
He alludes to the dumb talking point of right-wingers that NFL players are spoiled brats who don't face the same circumstances of those who often fall victims to police brutality. What a stupid talking point. That's like going to a cancer awareness event and telling the people there that they're spoiled brats because they have good health and cancer really doesn't affect them as much as the cancer patients. Or it's like going to a Save the Whales fundraiser and telling the people there it doesn't affect them because they don't live in the ocean. It's a stupid talking point and it holds no real weight in the argument that is actually at hand. Never mind the investigations of police brutality that actually happened to NFL players themselves.
But Colin Kaepernick was made into a national hero by the left, which thinks that it is a Muhammad Ali-like stance to kneel for the national anthem.
When students protest at a school for unfair treatment by banding together to block the doorways, they aren't protesting doorways. When people protest on highway ramps, they're not protesting traffic or highways. NFL players are protesting police brutality and protesting for police reform. But in this particular case, again, he throws himself into the wall because if Colin Kaepernick actually was protesting the national anthem itself, people have been protesting the national anthem itself for decades, even since the 1940s in some cases. Protesting the anthem is almost as old as black players playing in the NFL league. The third verse of the national anthem flaunts the death of slaves hired to fight and die without escape. It was written by Francis Scott Key, a racist lawyer who fought to subjugate black people at every chance he could take. And he was also one of the biggest racists in United States history. The national anthem itself is irrefutably a relic of racism. And if Colin Kaepernick protested the anthem itself, which he is not, it actually does place him on footing ground with Muhammad Ali. But again, he's not protesting the anthem. Because Ali is celebrated now doesn't mean he was celebrated when he protested. In fact, when he protested, he was shamed and berated and mistreated, similar to the way that Colin Kaepernick is being berated by ignorant haters like Ben Shapiro. It was decades later until Muhammad Ali became realized for his sacrifices. Ben Shapiro is on the wrong side of history yet again.
He did this in 2016. It became a national issue. President Trump commented on it as a candidate. It was very polarizing. Most Americans opposed kneeling for the anthem, but there's a heavy segment, particularly in the black community, that supported Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the national anthem. There's a very big racial gap in the polling numbers on kneeling for the national anthem.
And that's another lie. People of all races support Colin Kaepernick. The difference when it comes to the white supporters is the age group. Younger white consumers support Colin Kaepernick. It is older white people who do not support Colin Kaepernick.
That Nike is attempting to appeal to this particular consumer base, along with a left that will resonate to the support of Colin Kaepernick. And it's also important to note that according to Nielsen, African Americans are more likely to interact with brands on social media or to use social networks to support companies and brands, 44% more likely. So they're hoping that this campaign goes viral, particularly among black audiences.
Young white consumers support Colin Kaepernick. It is the older whites, predominantly male, who don't support Colin Kaepernick. And the reason they don't is because they continue to mischaracterize his argument. So let me ask you conservatives, is this your debate guy? This is the conservatives' debate guy? Well, apparently either again, Ben is running on his feelings instead of facts, or he is too stupid to actually know what it is he's even talking about. Young white people support Colin Kaepernick. That's the difference when it comes to Nike's consumer base and Nike consumer support. So again, you're completely lying by omitting the actual facts and the details.
So Colin Kaepernick was offered in 2017, or in 2016, he was offered the chance to join the Denver Broncos. John Elway announced this in 2018. He was asked about picking up Colin Kaepernick, and he said, "I said this a while ago. Colin had his chance to be here. We offered him a contract, and he didn't take it." Elway was referring to the 2016 season. Denver tried to trade for Kaepernick, who was under contract with the 49ers at a time. The quarterback would not agree to a restructured deal with Denver. And then the Broncos selected a couple of backup quarterbacks, and he lost his opportunity. And it turned out nobody really wanted the headache of Colin Kaepernick, not just because of the publicity, although publicity is something you have to take into account when you are a National Football League team, but also because he's just not a very good quarterback. Because Colin Kaepernick, after basically one spectacular season, fell off the map, and that's not unusual.
Colin Kaepernick didn't sign with the Broncos for a number of reasons. So again, we are avoiding the actual facts and details in order to spotlight feelings. Denver was expected to put up a third-round pick in the trade, but they didn't have a third-round pick to offer. We aren't even going to get into the actual numbers of the contract or other circumstances. There was a list of hurdles and complications that were involved with the trade, which is why the trade didn't happen. It wasn't a good deal for everybody that was involved, and there were a lot of factors at play, and overall, the trade itself had almost nothing to do with the protest. Mr. Facts Over Feelings proves yet again that he doesn't know any of the facts, or he just prefers to push lies and propaganda. Which one is it? I sincerely hope this is not your debate guy. It's Ben Shapiro. And the title of the video is How to Debate Climate Change.
On the climate change issue, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert in reading the study.
I don't have enough knowledge on the subject to give a legitimate debate. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem, right? Because he's being honest. But the title of the video is How to Debate Climate Change. Like he debunks his own ability to debate climate change in the very first sentence out of his mouth in this video. It's got almost 1 million views, and this is a duplicate video, so it's been posted around a couple of times on a couple of channels.
The subset of climate scientists is not all that large, so I really don't care what a doctor in biology has to say about climate change. He knows as much as I do. So it depends on what they have a doctorate in.
Now, I've seen Ben debate on college campuses where a guy challenges Ben's authority to make claims on any particular subject, to which Ben replies that being an expert in the field does not limit the validity of his opinion on the topic because he has done his research on the topic. So here in this video, we see Ben completely reverse that argument for the sake of his own convenience and say that there are certain engineers that barely knows as much as he does about global warming, and their opinions are in no way valid because they are not experts of climate change. Really, Ben?
What exactly is the real imminent threat to human life? I mean, the idea that the gradual rise of sea levels is going to kill hundreds of millions of people it's just fantasy. It's just fantasy. It's not going to kill. They act like the day after tomorrow is how global warming is going to be. Right? Like the giant wave is going to sweep in, and then the next morning it will freeze, and all of New York will be under ice, and Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal will be trying to fight their way through it. That's not how global warming is going to happen. Right? Global warming is going to happen, if it does happen, the rate they say it's going to, it's supposed to happen over the course of the next 100 years. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
So next, he says that if the sea level raises 10 feet, people will sell their homes and move. Yeah, he says that if the sea level raises 10 feet over the next century, that people will sell their homes and move because the whole place is underwater. Watch the video. I can't even make this up. This is what he says. Ben, the land is no longer sustainable if everything's underwater, and if everybody has to move, who are they going to sell their houses to, Ben? You would think that somebody who is well into socioeconomic statuses of different countries, especially places like Syria, would know this because some of the people in the country of Syria are migrants because the places where they live, they can no longer sustain their lives, their income. And some of those people who come from those places happen to be farmers. And the problem that those farmers were having is that the climate was not accurate for them to grow their crops. I'm not saying that's the entirety of the conflict in Syria by any means, but a very, very obvious portion of it is that the agricultural systems out there are not what they used to be.
What exactly is the real imminent threat to human life? I mean, the idea that the gradual rise of sea levels is going to kill hundreds of millions of people it's just fantasy.
If the sea level is raised 10 feet, That is representing huge agricultural changes around the entire planet. Not to mention thermal warming of the ocean. It's not a good sign for a lot of people in a lot of different businesses, a lot of different lines of work. This is terrible for the coral reef.
It's not like it's all going to happen at once. Like there's just a big tsunami that comes and wipes out everybody. So human beings have a way of adjusting. Human beings have a way of dealing with these things. And I have more faith in human beings to deal with the crucial move from Santa Monica to the San Fernando Valley than I do in okay, we're all going to stop using our cars, burning coal, and using electricity. That seems to me a much worse solution than, okay, I'm going to have to sell my beachfront property at a discount price. By the way, that's who it's going to hit, the people with beachfront property. It's not going to hit anybody in Indiana. You're pretty safe. It'll be all right.
Okay. Did Ben Shapiro just say that global warming, climate change, is only going to affect people with beachfront property? Beachfront property. Did you just say that? So every scientist and all of these biologists and all of these meteorologists and experts are all concerned about global warming because it's going to affect the value of beachfront property. Ben Shapiro just said that out of his mouth. People watched this video and clicked the like button. This is sad, man. Beachfront property. They're going to sell the beachfront property and move. Did you prepare that and write that down in your speech so that you could come in? Is this what you get paid to do? How do you get a check for this?
I do know that certain aspects that have been widely talked about have been debunked. The idea that the Arctic ice is disappearing is nonsense. The idea that the hockey stick graph is anything remotely resembling reality. The hockey stick graph shows over the last century, and it's too short a period of time to do climate change statistics like this. The Earth basically has not been warming for the last 15 years or so. Right, so you're right. There are a lot of climate scientists and climatologists who have said that global warming is an absolute fact, and anthropogenic global warming is an absolute fact. I'm not saying that it's not happening. It may be happening. I'm happy to say that it may be happening. I may even be happy to say that it's probably happening.
Global warming is not happening, and then he goes into, well, it could be happening. I'm not saying it's not happening because it might be happening. Let's say if it is happening, but it's not happening. So when you do that, then you have to go back to your very first statement, which was you don't have enough experience or have done enough research on this topic to make a legitimate debate. People are clicking the like button, so people are listening to this information, which is misinformation at best, and they're living by it because this is the great Ben Shapiro.
I think that Alex Jones should not be banned from Apple and Facebook simply because the standards that are being used by a lot of these social media companies are extraordinarily vague. Apple and Facebook, according to CNBC, have now clamped down on content by Alex Jones Monday. The former pulled 5 of his podcasts. The latter removed 4 pages controlled by him. Apple confirmed on Monday it removed 5 of the 6 podcasts, which included Jones' infamous The Alex Jones Show, as well as a number of other InfoWars audio streams. The news was originally reported by BuzzFeed News. Jones, of course, is a controversial conspiracy theorist who has claimed that the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax, and he has been hit with other content bans from YouTube as well as Spotify. Apple's move is pretty dramatic. They've taken down the entire library of InfoWars podcasts rather than a select few episodes. An Apple spokesperson said, quote, Apple does not tolerate hate speech, and we have clear guidelines that creators and developers must follow to ensure we provide a safe environment for all of our users. Podcasts that violate these guidelines are removable from our directory, making them no longer searchable or available for download or streaming. We believe in representing a wide range of views so long as those people are respectful to those with differing opinions. So they say that he has persistently uploaded content in breach of various content guidelines. Facebook says the same. In July, Facebook removed 4 of Jones's videos and hit his own personal profile with a 30-day ban over what the firm deemed as violation of its policies on bullying and hate speech. The company explained that when it deletes content, the removal counts as a strike, essentially a warning against the person that uploaded it in the first place. In the case of pages, Facebook says it holds both a page and an administrator who posts content in violation of its rules accountable. They said that this was not about fake news. They said this was not because of Jones's tendencies toward conspiracism. Instead, it was about hate speech and bullying. They say, well, much of the discussion around InfoWars has been related to false news, which is a serious issue we are working to address by demoting links marked wrong by fact checkers and suggesting additional content. None of the violations that spurred today's removals were related to this. So it is, again, unclear what exactly it was that triggered all of this. They say that it was his threatening language. But again, I would need to see the specific threatening language that he was using. And I'm somebody who's been threatened by Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones has legitimately gone on his show and threatened that he would send his buddies down to the people who help fund Daily Wire, that he would send those people down to their ranch in Texas and have them harassed. I mean, Alex Jones is a bad guy. But the problem is this. Once you start saying that hate speech is a rationale for banning people from social media, you get into some very, very vague territory.
Imagine that being your lawyer.
Your Honor, I would like to see these threats or evidence of these threats allegedly made by my client. I would also like to add that my client has threatened me as well.
They say that it was his threatening language, but again, I would need to see the specific threatening language that he was using. And I'm somebody who's been threatened by Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones has legitimately gone on his show and threatened that he would send his buddies when people are seeking to place order on chaos. They look to conspiracy theories. There are a lot of people who are big names, who are followers of Alex Jones. Most famously, the President of the United States used to call in regularly to Alex Jones and saw Alex Jones as a quasi-ally. Alex Jones claimed that after the election, President Trump was calling him fairly regularly. The problem is this. Once you start saying that hate speech is a rationale for banning people from social media, you get into some very, very vague territory. Because as we know, the left does not have a consistent standard that they uphold when they are looking at hate speech. They don't say that anything that is hateful is banned and then define hateful in extraordinarily specific terms. They don't say anything that is offensive is banned, because a lot of things are offensive. Instead, they use this term hate speech to simply label stuff they don't like hate speech.
Now, watch closely, folks, as Ben Shapiro debunks his own lie.
The company said it removed Alex Jones's pages for glorifying violence, which violates our graphic violence policy, and using dehumanizing language to describe people who are transgender, Muslim, and immigrants, which violates our hate speech policies. Again, this is where we get into some serious issues. What exactly violates that hate speech policy? The company said it removed Alex Jones's pages for glorifying violence, which violates our graphic violence policy, and using dehumanizing language to describe people who are transgender, Muslim, and immigrants, which violates our hate speech policies. Again, this is where we get into some serious issues. What exactly violates that hate speech policy? Glorifying violence, which violates our graphic violence policy. Glorifying violence, which violates our graphic violence policy. And using dehumanizing language to describe people who are transgender, Muslim, and immigrants, which violates our hate speech policies. Again, this is where we get into some serious issues. What exactly violates that hate speech policy? What exactly violates that hate speech policy? And using dehumanizing language to describe people who are transgender, Muslim, and immigrants, which violates our hate speech policy.
There's nothing vague about that description.
Again, one of the things that's very weird about this is that I really dislike Alex Jones's brand. I think that Alex Jones is a liar. I think he's a conspiracist. I think he does say horrible things and hateful things on a regular basis.
He says that the reason why Alex Jones should not be banned is because the explanation that was given for the banning was too vague. Not because an Alex Jones supporter went into a pizza shop with a weapon and fired. Not because Alex Jones said that Sandy Hook is a hoax and that caused not only pain and distress in these people's lives, but it also caused families to be harassed by Alex Jones supporters. Not for any of those reasons, but because the explanation that was given for banning him was too vague. That's the reason why he should not be banned. That is just so many levels of stupid. Ben Shapiro was back at his lies again, showing everybody what a crappy lawyer he is. And those are his words, not mine. Just watch.
This is all insanity, and again, it's demonstrative of the fact that if we really wanted to get to the truth of the situation, if Democrats really gave one crap about this, what Democrats would be doing is putting this woman in front of a hearing, calling whatever witnesses they could, and then they would be attempting to bolster her case. They wouldn't be hiding her and then suggesting that any questions to be asked are somehow undermining the justice system.
Don't believe everything that you hear. It doesn't matter how smart you think somebody is. So he's saying the Democrats should call whatever witnesses they want into a hearing. That is so extraordinarily dishonest, and here's why. Democrats can't call whoever they want into a hearing. You would have to understand the basic Senate committee rules to know that. This is one-on-one stuff. If you don't know how witnesses actually get brought to the committee floor, then you shouldn't be speaking on Democrats or Republicans holding a hearing, because the Democrats don't even have the power to hold this hearing that you speak of. Just to be honest, the only way to make a witness show up is with a subpoena. Only person who can actually issue that subpoena is Chuck Grassley. Why? Because Chuck Grassley is the committee chairman, and he has to be in agreement with the minority leader, who is Dianne Feinstein. And Chuck Grassley has already said, just like a few other Republicans have said, that they just want to push through this thing. So let's be honest. So if Chuck Grassley has to have the agreement of the minority leader, which is Dianne Feinstein, or a majority vote of the complete committee, then the Republicans are the only ones who can have whatever hearing it is that you're talking about. And there's no way whatsoever for Democrats to override the process to do what Ben says they would do if they, quote, gave a crap. It's clear to see that Ben gives a crap, and he does it with his mouth. That's what makes him a crappy lawyer. You can say that he's just ignorant, or you can call him a liar, but you cannot say he sticks to the facts. And here yet again we see Ben do his favorite thing in the world, where he takes an argument that he creates all by himself and then defeats it all by himself, and he is the victor, patting himself on the back. It's no different. This guy's just coming up with the nastiest, filthiest, most disrespectful thing he can think of off the top of his head to try to take away the happiness of children, teenagers, and young adults who want to go see a superhero movie.
Everyone in the media is talking about the most important thing that has ever happened in the history of humanity, or at least since Caitlyn Jenner became a woman, a transgender woman. And that, of course, is the release of Black Panther. It is so deeply important. It is, we've heard it's deeply important to millions of Black Americans who, after all, were not liberated from slavery 200 years ago and liberated by the civil rights movement with federal legislation, have not been gradually restored to what always should have been full civil rights in the United States.
There's nobody that would ever think that a Black Panther movie would be the greatest thing that happened in the Black community, or it would be comparable to suffrage. Historical moments when it comes to Black suffrage in the United States.
This is the most important moment in Black American history. Not Martin Luther King, not Frederick Douglass, not the Civil War, not the end of Jim Crow, none of that. Not Brown versus Board. The most important thing is that Chadwick Boseman puts claws on his hands and a mask on his face and runs around jumping off cars in CGI fashion.
The equivalency that he's trying to paint here, as though there's some sort of congruency between Black suffrage and the comic book hero, which is more of a celebration.
Deeply, deeply important. Black children everywhere will now believe that they too can be superheroes who jump off cars in fictional countries. It's very important.
There was a recognizable portion of Ben's following that loves Ben's race content, especially when he talks about Black people. So if you look at Ben's content, it's difficult for him to go 5-7 videos without mentioning Black people.
And none of that has mattered up till they made a Marvel movie about a superhero who is Black in a country filled with Black people. That's the change, right? Blade was not enough. Catwoman with Halle Berry, no. Okay, Wakanda is where it is.
Did this fool just say Blade? Did he just say Catwoman? Okay, you gotta be kidding me. Blade came out in the 90s. It's 2018. Basically, what this triggered little snowflake was saying to 12-year-old kids. This is Ben Shapiro talking to Black 12-year-olds, Black 15-year-olds, Black 18-year-olds. Saying, hey, Blade wasn't enough. That movie that came out in the 90s wasn't enough for you Black people. Now you have to get excited about this? Look how disgusting that is. Seriously. This is a brand new level of butthurt.
Now, you may sense that I'm mocking a little bit. The reason I'm mocking a little bit is because I hate this kind of identity politics. I think it's incredibly stupid.
Does anybody else notice the irony of a man who claims that he hates identity politics, but gets paid to travel around the country looking for support groups of people who hate identity politics? Identity politics pays a lot of Ben Shapiro's bills. Let's make no mistake about that.
I think it's incredibly stupid because, again, I grew up as an Orthodox Jewish kid where no American president has been Jewish. And no American president has been an Orthodox Jew.
To be accurate, he feels that the excitement and the hype and the politicization of Black Panther is stupid because there's never been a Jewish president.
And yet, I grew up on 1776, essentially worshiping the founding fathers, none of whom were Jewish. Right? And yesterday, my daughter actually was on Shabbat. And I was sitting around with my daughter, and my daughter was talking about how she's talking about the presidents because she's learning about the presidents in preschool. She's very politically active, my daughter. She's 4 years old, and she knows many of the presidents. She is familiar with the life stories of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. And she said, "Daddy, was George Washington Jewish?" And I said, "No, he wasn't." And she said, "Is Donald Trump Jewish?" And I said, "No, he's not." And she said, "Have any of the presidents been Jewish?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Why haven't any of the presidents been Jewish?" And she's 4, so I didn't go into the full explanation. But what I said is, you know, they just haven't been. But maybe there'll be a Jewish president in the future. Would you like to be president one day? She said, "I don't know. It sounds boring." And so, which I think is an astute observation on the part of my daughter. But the point is this.
Oh, wait. I think I missed something. Run that tape back one more time.
The reason I'm mocking a little bit is because I hate this kind of identity politics. Because I hate this kind of identity politics. I think it's incredibly stupid.
Okay, that clarifies everything now. He hates this kind of identity politics. Because Ben does not hate identity politics as much as he likes to talk about his identity in politics.
Right? If you're not telling your kids they can be anything in America, you're doing something wrong as a parent. And if you had to wait until Black Panther came out, right? We heard this about Barack Obama when he was elected too. Now that Obama's been president, Black Americans will feel like they too can be president. It's a transformative moment. And yet, all we hear now is that America is deeply racist and Black people are still systemically discriminated against, and that Black people are still victims in American society. So it turned out it didn't mean anything.
Everything he's saying in this is just pure ignorance and pure filth. Just to be as disrespectful as he possibly can to what some people feel is something they should celebrate. Excitement around the hype of the movie was not about seeing a Black character on screen. It was about the cast that Black character was surrounded by. It was about the environments and the settings that character was surrounded by. It was about the plot, the director. It was about the producers. It was about the film studio where it was actually shot, which was in Atlanta, Georgia, and also Korea. There was some scenes there as well, and in Africa and in Oakland. You know, it was about those localities being involved. It was about representation. It was about Nate Moore getting his foot through and pushing this project. So the excitement about Black Panther wasn't just seeing a Black person on screen. As kids, comic books and cartoons kept showing us, look how great this white man is, and look how cool this white man is. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But Black Panther was giving kids a chance to see, look how cool you are too. And it's about damn time. What do you mean Blade wasn't enough? No, it wasn't enough. What do you mean Catwoman wasn't enough? Was Catwoman enough for you? That movie was terrible. What are you talking about?
When Obama was president, we were told it meant everything. And then he was president for 2 terms, right? Reelected overwhelmingly. And then it turns out it didn't mean anything because we needed Chadwick Boseman to somehow make sure that Black people felt accepted in American society because a bunch of white executives at Marvel greenlit a film about Black people in a fictional country in Africa.
And this is where we prove that this is straight ignorance, no research, because this project was actually launched by Nate Moore, a Black Marvel executive. And that's so inconsiderate for you to bring race into this picture. If it wasn't about identity politics, then why are you going as far as to bring the race of the people who made the project happen into the picture? You made a bunch of statements based on your feelings and your ignorance and not the facts. For a man who does not like identity politics, you sure know when to pick a perfect place to position a racial divide in your argument.
Fine, yeah, the 13th Amendment bans slavery and involuntary service.
I know, it's really bad. But they mainly pointed to a Netflix documentary called 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Featuring Van Jones and I believe, yeah, I know. Even like
I like Van, but he's a comic.
Nixon campaign advisors and other campaign advisors of previous presidents. So I'd like to know what do you think about the prison system in terms of how it is a system of oppression?
It is not a system of oppression to put criminals in prison. So my view of the criminal justice system is that if you commit a crime, you should go to jail. And there's a very easy way to avoid jail, and it's called not committing crimes. So there's a lot of talk in the United States about the bias in the criminal justice system. There's only one problem with this idea, which is that the crime reports match up entirely with crime arrests, meaning that the number of crime reports that are received by the cops match up by race with the number of arrests they make. So it's not like you've got an enormous number of white people calling the cops on white people, and then the police just ignore it, and 0 Black people calling the cops on Black people, and the police just go and pick up every Black person they can find. The crime rate reports are entirely consistent.
The direct verbatim statement from Ben Shapiro is that the U.S. criminal justice system, the United States criminal justice system, does not operate under any sort of racial bias. And the reason is because that the crime reports received by the police from civilians match up by race completely with crime statistics. Okay, first and foremost, I'm just going to flat out explain why that's false, because the report that he's talking about doesn't exist. There is no comprehensive report that compares police phone calls to crime arrests in the United States with all 13,000 plus agencies that report or that provide data to the FBI for the Uniform Crime Report. I'll say that for you in simpler terms. Whatever report he's talking about that matches up doesn't exist. And this isn't my word. This is the word of 911.gov.
According to 911, a report of that nature literally won't even exist until March of 2019. Ben's video has to be at least 5 years prior to that. The system doesn't exist, but 911 is in the process of creating that system right now. There are 240 million 911 calls annually, and there's no institution dedicated to collecting 240 million phone calls and breaking them down on a comprehensive scale that would uncover the entire crime report. Just like he said, he's challenging the entire, not only the entire crime report, but he's challenging the entire criminal justice system entirely by phone reports that do not exist.
And according to 911, you know, the number you dial when you're calling the cops to make a crime report, as Ben likes to put it.
Virtually all murder in the United States takes place not in rural areas of states, but in the big cities. Virtually all murder in the United States takes place not in rural areas of states, but in the big cities.
All murder does not happen in the big cities. In fact, in 2016, cities with a population of less than 250,000 committed about 1/3 those 17,000 murders from 2016. So what I'm about to say is going to hurt a lot of white people's feelings, and it's going to make some white people angry. And to those people, I say that you should be angry, but not at me, because I am not the problem. I am simply a messenger. What you should be mad at is the circumstances that create the problem. When it comes to people who are racist, I'm much more angry at the way that they think than them as individuals. Anyone can develop and change. There's a great myth in this country about violence, especially when it comes to black on black violence, showcased in the news and in the forefront so often. There is a very sick and twisted obsession in this country with black on black violence. Misrepresented, overrepresented in the news, spoken about quite often, so often, it's like a regurgitated topic. All of these people who are regurgitating this topic are not people who are offering solutions. They're just people who are pointing their fingers. These hypothetical statements are based around a per capita observation of these statistics. But when you look at the country as a whole, white people commit 70% of the crime. 70% of crime in the United States is committed by whites, including 70% of violent crime. And this is where it actually averages out around all crimes. So when you look at violent crime, around 70%, sexual assault around 70%, rape around 70%, higher in certain areas,
there are two assault categories. Whites are much, much higher in one of the assault categories. Whites are much, much higher in DUIs and vehicular homicide. The biggest category of white on white violence in this country is gun violence. It's suicide. It's actually the number one way to die by gun in this country. White male suicides are almost the same amount as all homicides combined from all races in the United States of America. So then when you add on the white homicide statistics, you see that there is absolutely no such thing as a per capita disparity in gun violence between black people and white people. That is an actual statistical fact. So anyone who says otherwise is absolutely lying. I challenge anyone who says otherwise to a live debate. I have the statistics right in front of me. You have the statistics right in front of you. If you go to the FBI Uniform Crime Report from 2016, you go to cdc.gov, you will see everything that I'm seeing. You will see everything that I'm saying is factual and true. So you see the sick and perverted and twisted obsession with black crime in the United States of America is simply the stereotypes of painting black people as criminals in this country. The sole reason that even exists is because they make money from that. There's money in locking black people up. There's money in putting handcuffs on young black people. And that is the whole reason this stereotype exists. And look at their sick obsession with it. If you go to YouTube and you search for black crime, you get thousands and thousands of videos of people regurgitating statistics about black crime and black violence, but none of them are talking about white violence. You go to YouTube and you search for white crime, you'll see a bunch of Lil Dicky videos. When you look at black people on YouTube, you get thousands, and I mean thousands, of videos of people regurgitating these false statistics about black crime. That is a sick and twisted obsession. It is a perversion. These people are sick. They need help.
I'm also going to mention that I actually have a solution. I'm proposing a solution, unlike all of these hypocrites who are only pointing their fingers. The solution is moral education.
13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder.
Fact. Despite making up just 13% of the population, blacks commit around half of homicides.
Black males who are involved in this crime and violence in numbers that are disproportionate to their
groups of people who are disproportionately likely to murder, or rather disproportionately involved in murder cases, let's put it that way, who represent a disproportionate share of murderers. It is not white people, actually. But
so all too often you're going to hear this stat regurgitated, and it's actually false, that black people are 13% of the U.S. population, but they commit 50% of murder. This is completely untrue. And here's why. If you use common sense, you would know that every murder case is not solved. So there's a huge portion of murders that never have culprits, that never have any conviction, that never have any arrests. So black people are charged and arrested for 50% of murders. But in terms of people who actually commit murders, they represent about 35%. And that number is from last year in 2016, and it has jumped up from years like 2012, 2013, when it was much lower. So when people say that black people commit 50% of murder, that's actually a complete falsehood. Committing the act of murder and being arrested and charged for murder are two completely different things. Okay? If you look at 2016, for example, there was 17,000 murders committed. Black people were arrested and charged with about 6,000 of those murders. 6,000 is not 50% of 17,000. If any of you think that 17,000 is a number that you can cut in half and get 6,000, you should find your elementary school right now and protest. Whatever school you went to needs to be completely shut down and reformed. You do not have a proper education. Reality is there's a very big category called unknown. So if you look at the 2016 stats, you'll see that white people were known to commit 30% of murders. Black people were known to commit 35% of murders. And there's a huge, huge category, 32% of unknown culprits and unknown cases where they don't have any convictions in a murder case. And the second thing you're going to hear about the black people commit 50% of all murders is that there's a disproportionate representation. Well, when people say that black people commit a disproportionate amount of murder, what you are inherently implying is that there's something as a proportionate amount of murder. And I'd like to ask you, what amount of murder is proportionate? What amount of murder are you okay with? So if black people were 13% of the population and committed 13% of murders, you would be fine with that? That's a good enough amount of people to get killed every year? That's okay in your book? What's disproportionate is the amount of people that regurgitate this statistic and they're not directly affected by these crimes. When you see that black on black crime is an issue, it's because the black people are being affected by it. Think about the white murder rate, and I'm not anti-white by any means. What I am is anti-bullshit, anti-propaganda. So if black people kill black people at the same rate that white people kill white people, then why is white on white crime not an issue for the community that it is directly affecting? Why would they rather highlight black on black crime? That's disproportionate. What's disproportionate is the amount of right-wing conservatives that regurgitate these statistics and never have a probable or feasible solution. That's disproportionate. What's disproportionate is that the fact that over 92% of these crimes are committed by men. If there was a such thing as proportionate murder, then men and women would commit 50% of crime, right? 13% of the population would commit 13% of murders, right? 99.9% of black people have never killed anybody. That's disproportionate. That's what you call an overrepresentation. So you use that information to categorize and villainize an entire group of people based on their skin color, when less than 1/100,000th of 1% of that population ever committed that act. So if I gave you a sandwich that was 99.9% shit and the rest of it was ham, would you call that a ham sandwich? So again, Ben likes to use the word disproportionate. But in reality, that isn't the case. And if it is the case, then that would mean that all crime is disproportionate. And if you look around, you would see different studies show that men commit as much as 80% of all crimes, which by Ben Shapiro's propaganda jargon is very, very disproportionate. If we apply that math to the actual crime charts, we see that black men are not the only disproportional group representation. In fact, if you use rough math, knowing that whites are arrested for roughly 70% of all crimes and blacks are arrested for 27% of all crimes, factor in the lowest crime conviction rate for any racial or age group being white women, and you'll see what Ben would himself define as disproportionate crime committed by, well, you know who. And if you don't, do the math. Crime is not a race issue. Crime is a criminal issue. Yes, I do know that they have a thing as Hispanic whites, but they also have a thing called Hispanic blacks. Afro-Latinas are included in the black population. Hispanic whites are included in the white population. So there are people included in this population as white people that you probably wouldn't consider white, and they probably wouldn't consider themselves white. And on the other side, there are people included in the black population that you wouldn't consider black, and they themselves don't consider themselves black. So what we have here is an issue of color grading. Because Hispanic and Latino is not seen as a race, it's actually seen as an ethnicity. So once we actually get a proper perspective on these statistics, then we can actually gauge what needs to be done about it. But in the meantime, this lie continues to get regurgitated over and over and over again. And the reason that they do that is so that they could paint people as villains based on their skin color. It's as simple as that. I mean, historically, it's been very, very accurate. It's been ongoing. And there hasn't been anything done to stop it. Well,
Until now, that is. Everything I'm saying to you came from the FBI crime report from 2016. So feel free to go and look it up yourself. Do the reading, find out what race is considered what race, what ethnicity is included. Can't say that black people commit 50% of murders because every murder case is not solved. And you would think this is obvious to somebody like a lawyer, which I thought Ben Shapiro was. But I guess Ben is exceptionally ignorant to actual objective truths and facts. And if you look at the Uniform Crime Report, you'll see about 28 different categories. And out of those 28 different categories, blacks only lead in 2 or 3. Does the fact that no one ever states that seem disproportionate to you? Is there a disproportionate amount of attention paid to these 3 categories versus 28, which are dominated by non-blacks? Doesn't that seem disproportionate to you? But the only time you hear disproportionate and crime in the same sentence together is somebody telling you about black people committing murders, which 99.9% of them never have. 6,000 murders from 43 million blacks, it does not sound as bad as 50% of murders, does it? Not when you can do math. Now, I'm not saying this to cover for anybody's mistakes. I'm not saying this to justify any wrongdoings of any people of any race. All murder is disproportionate. And if you don't believe that this propaganda is designed to paint blacks as villain historically, take a look at the butthurt trolls in the comment section who have been raised on this propaganda and they don't know any other way to think. Top 3 cities for crime in the United States of America have 5%, 4%, and 3% black populations, respectively. So after all of that, what is the solution? Well, the solution is simple. It's called the Million Man Movement. The solution is to bring a strong economy and strong education to these communities. The way to a solution is through moral education and economic structure. We can create economic structure using the Triple M platform, which is why I make this content. If you don't know what the Triple M platform is, feel free to check out my other content.
A fellow named Daniel Shaver, he's a white guy who was apparently pointing a BB gun out of his window, and a bunch of hotel guests saw it, and they called the cops. The cops show up and they shoot him to death. Here's a little bit of the tape.
Ben Shapiro claims that he is not a fan of identity politics and that he prefers facts over feelings. Today, we will make 2 very clear observations of him violating his own precedent when we hear Ben say that there was no outrage, or that this outrage does not match that of the Michael Brown or Ferguson case, which is untrue because this case had national coverage and it was spoken about on ABC, NBC, CNN. It was a major story that grabbed headlines all over the nation. People like Philip DeFranco, Joe Rogan, Killer Mike, endless amounts of people spoke out about this Daniel Shaver story. So it's very untrue that there was no outrage around this case. There was national outrage around this case, and there continues to be national outrage around this case. They have a GoFundMe page that, as of this moment, is about $3,000 away from reaching its goal of $100,000. Please contribute to it. And what we see here today is Ben Shapiro again taking an event and adding the identity of race to it while he's politicizing it.
Okay, so they killed this guy. I mean, it looks a lot like murder, right? You can see that his hand moves sort of toward his waistband, and this is the excuse that they're using, is they reach behind him. But this video is like 7 minutes long. They brought him out in the hallway. They shouted all sorts of contradictory commands. They told him to put his hands behind his head and then crawl toward them. And then the minute that he they actually told him to put his hands kind of, I guess, behind his head and crawl toward them. Like, you can't actually do all these things. So you have one idiot supervisor who is yelling all these commands at this guy. The guy's name was Shavers, Daniel Shaver. He was 26 years old. He'd been doing rum shots of the woman he'd met earlier in the day, showing off a pellet gun he used in his job in pest control. The graphic video was recorded by Brailsford's body camera, and it showed Shaver and the woman exiting the hotel room, immediately complying with commands from multiple officers. He puts his hands in the air. He lies down on the ground while informing the officer that no one else was in the hotel room, and one of the officers, a guy named Charles Langley, says, if you make a mistake, another mistake, there's a very severe possibility you're both going to get shot. He said, I'm not here to be tactful and diplomatic with you. You listen, you obey. And then he gives him orders for 5 solid minutes. 5 solid minutes. He's playing, you know, put your right foot in, put your right foot out. He's playing the hokey pokey with him. He's playing Simon Says. He tells Shaver to put both his hands on top of his head. Then he instructs him to cross his left foot over his right foot. The guy's completely drunk. And then he says, if you move, we're going to consider that a threat. And then he says, crawl down the hallway. And he tells him to keep his legs crossed, push himself up into a kneeling position. And then his legs come uncrossed, prompting the officer to scream at him. And then he puts his hand near his waist, prompting another round of screaming. And he said, you do that again, we're going to shoot you. And he says, please don't shoot me. And then he crawls down the hallway. And at one point, because he's been lying face down, his shorts are falling down, and he's drunk, he moves to pull up his shorts, and then they shoot him to death. And the rifle that he was carrying, this cop, was etched with the phrase, you're effed. Just fantastic, guys. Just fantastic. Now, a couple things worth pointing out here. One, bad training matters. Number two, juries almost always give the benefit of the doubt to the cop. So a lot of the evidence that was presented talked about the sort of threat that had been reported by people in the next door room. They were afraid that if they walked over to the guy, there might be someone behind the door who was going to pop out and shoot them. So the officer was acquitted in this case. But number three, the level of national outrage over this case is not even, there have been no riots, there have been no protests, nothing. And the reason for that is because the guy who was shot is white. Let's be perfectly frank about this. It's because we are more concerned with racial conflagrations in this nation than we are really about police brutality. This is a pretty clear-cut case of police brutality and police misaction, and the level of outrage over it is not even close to the level of outrage over Michael Brown, who was justifiably shot by witness testimony and by circumstantial evidence. So it's just a horrifying video right there, and it goes to show you that, you know, cops in bad situations sometimes make bad choices.
He says that there were no protests for Daniel Shaver. What Ben fails to realize is that every protest against police brutality is a protest for Daniel Shaver. Every protest against police brutality is a protest for Philando Castile. Every protest against police brutality is against the unnecessary force used by these officers, the lack of training. All of it goes into one. And if we want to solve the issue, we must properly address the issue. And what you are not doing is when you decide to divide, where divide does not need to exist. There was no need for you to bring race into this conversation. There was no need for you to bring race into the picture here. That was your obsession rearing its ugly head again.
But number three, the level of national outrage over this case is not even, there have been no riots, there have been no protests, nothing. And the reason for that is because the guy who was shot is white.
That's not the way you communicate that. If that's the way you want to communicate that white people are killed by police as well, then say, hey, look, white people are killed by police as well. This is a problem that affects everybody and we need to work on solutions. But instead you say, oh, well, look, when white people get killed, we don't go around crying about it. That's disrespectful to that man who died and his family. The same police department in the same city where this exact same incident happened has a record of malicious behavior, a long record of police brutality against senior citizens. This was just a punk with a badge. And so this is just another way to draw lines and draw divides and say, hey, we are superior in this fashion because we don't do this and we don't do that. Next thing that he says is that there were no riots or protests because the guy is white. You're going to say the only reason people didn't riot is because he's white, as if white people don't riot. There may be differences in the reason that white people and black people riot, but when it comes to the riot themselves, nothing changes. Properties get damaged, cars get set on fire, places get looted, buildings get broken into, houses get broken into, people die, people are beaten by the police, people are arrested, violence happens, injuries happen, fire trucks, ambulance. There's zero difference. No difference at all between a white riot and a black riot, except for the reason that those two groups of people are rioting. Now, again, I'm not approving of anybody doing a riot. This is not to make excuses for anybody's behavior. This is to be contextually accurate with the comparison that Ben Shapiro politicized. So when white people are rioting because of pumpkins, White people are rioting because their team won a game, because their team lost a game. White people are rioting because a sexual deviant and another person who covered it up got fired. I can't even make that up. Black people riot for civil rights. Black people riot because they are being mistreated. Black people riot for taxation without representation. This is not to make excuses for anybody's vile behavior. This is to provide context. This is about being contextually accurate. I don't know if there are prerequisites for a riot, but if I had to list out reasons, pumpkins would not be on that list. My favorite team winning the game would not be on that list. Or a sexual deviant being fired for sexual misconduct would not be on that list. Always has to be some sort of misalignment in Ben's argument. So both of those positions are disgusting positions to have, especially when something like this is on the table. They're looking for justice for Daniel Shavers. He left behind a beautiful family. He left behind 2 little girls, and one of his little girls was experiencing extreme difficulties in school. And she told her mother that she wanted to take herself because she wanted to be with her father. So you can't imagine the damage that has been done to this family and these people. This was an egregious act by the police. All we do is talk about treating the symptoms. We never address the actual disease. We never look for the root solution. The root solution is not just police reform, but police reform is needed. And the root solution is not just moral education in our school systems, but moral education in our school systems is needed. And also teach our children how to interact with the police, no matter what race or socioeconomic background they have. You should all be aware of your rights. And we don't have classes on our curriculums throughout the nation that teach kids how to interact with police, something that people need to know. But then again, school doesn't teach kids most of what they need to know. It's great for brain food, but not for life. Not for functionality. We need to restructure our school systems the same way that we need to restructure our police systems. It's as simple as that. But the conflict, the problem is that you have for-profit prisons. You have a profit industry from chaos. When you live in a country that profits from chaos, that profits from subjugating its own citizens, there lies the biggest problem, the actual root of the problem.
Bottom line to that is that you just should have never made that horrible point to begin with. I am not here to do what Ben tried to do with his coverage of this incident. What I am here to do is suggest some possible solutions, and maybe we could discuss the solutions. And the comparison of race under these circumstances is completely uncalled for, man. It's completely uncalled for. And the fact that you did so with such a sloppy bargaining coin says a lot. It speaks volume about you, your content, your fan base, and your intentions.
Okay, so the truth is, and this is sad to say, but the black crime rate has been significantly higher than the white crime rate for literally 150 years. It's been very high for a very long time. The black murder rate was 10 times the white murder rate in 1900. So this has been true for a very, very long time.
Okay, you have got to be kidding me. This man just said that the black crime rate has been higher than the white crime rate for literally 150 years. So let's go back 150 years ago to 1868. The 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, was ratified in 1865. So let me ask you a question. 3 years after slavery ended, do you think cops treated black people the same way they treated white people? We'll jump forward 100 years to 1968 during the Civil Rights Movement, when you saw black people being beaten, sprayed with hoses, and attacked by dogs. Say something that's silly when there's all of this empirical data, all of this film, all of this footage of black people being attacked by police officers, teenage black kids being attacked by police officers for trying to walk into school. Now, shortly after, he mentions the year 1900, and I'm hoping he doesn't think 1900 was 150 years ago. I mean, judging from the first statement he made, he could possibly, but we're going to try to give him the benefit of the doubt, move on. But that's absolutely nonsensical. As a matter of fact, national crime reports were not collected by the FBI until the year 1930. The information available shows that there was zero difference when it comes to race. The reason that the Uniform Crime Report was started by the FBI in 1930 is to actually prevent newspapers from creating fake crime waves, which resulted in more violence and more oppression for minorities, including and especially blacks. Newspapers in the early 1900s would create these fake crime waves. There were all of these fake reports of crime, especially people accusing black people of doing things they did not do. I mean, if you even look at examples like Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Little Africa, or some people call it Black Wall Street, when you have a community of black people being murdered for a false crime report that never happened. There was a long history around fake crime reports, which is why the Uniform Crime Report came to exist in 1930. So the information that you just gave on stage was completely, terribly false.